Welcome, everybody, to the Sweet Spot Global Leadership Summit, where we are speaking all week to visionary organizations and leaders and how you can thrive from the inside out so that you can have a powerfully positive global impact in everything that you do. And I'm super excited to bring the wonderful Dolphin Kasper here today. Welcome, Dolphin. So great to have you here.
Thanks, Sarah. Great to be here.
So we're going to be talking to Dolphin all about communication and specifically transformative communication, which I'm really curious to dive into what that looks like and what that means. But first, I just want to quickly introduce you, Dolphin. So Dolphin is a Canadian-born author. I'm also Canadian, so great to meet another Canadian here. He's also a transformational communicator and human potential enthusiast, which sounds incredible. And he's been coaching, speaking, facilitating internationally for over 20 years. So Dolphin, let's just dive right in, shall we, about transformative communication, what that is, and how that's really so important for leadership and really making a difference in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on kind of how deep we want to go. I'm just going to kind of play off of you. I'm going to speak it as it occurs for me. I love to get into the kind of etymology of language, and so if we look at communication, commune is the root, and then the origin meaning is essentially to come into shared meaning, to come into shared understanding. And if we go dig even deeper, it's to come into a kind of togetherness or a oneness. So when we communicate, there's an opportunity to come into a place where we're not two separate people, but we're in a kind of collaborative, I like talking about collective flow. So communication is a vehicle by which we can come into a shared movement together. And if we talk about leadership or organizational efficacy and productivity and success, you're never going to be more successful than when you have a team of people that are operating as a single unit. And we see it in sport. So I worked in high performance sport for years. And I think one of the challenges that we run into around communication is if we have sort of narrow short-term agendas or goals that we're trying to achieve, and as individuals we don't see things quite the same, which is almost always the case, then we get into conflict and friction and essentially the wastage of energy and resources trying to navigate those differences of opinions and values. And so one of the things that transformative communication does is it creates a container within which we actually put those short-term agendas just a little bit to the side. And it's sort of like the rabbit and the hare. If we rush things, if we try to get it all done right away, we don't end up building what enables us to really go there in the medium to long term. So transformative communication is essentially a shift of priority when it comes to what we're doing together. And paradoxically, when we do that, we end up being much more effective when it comes to those more mundane productivity pieces, because we know what we're doing them for, not in and of themselves, like, okay, pushing this paper or making this phone call or sending this email, so what? But if that's in service to something that really matters to us, all of a sudden we show up with more of ourselves. We show up with more of an integrity and a desire to do our very best. And I think that's something that most organizations are deeply longing for and deeply wanting to learn. How do I invite my employees to show up with their best versus to just show up?
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think that what's the challenge is there may be this sort of desire to have that kind of thriving team, that organization where everybody's empowered and engaged and really bringing their best selves to work and kind of bringing their genius. That's kind of my mission, is to help create that. But I think the challenge is, how do you make that happen? How do you build that? So I guess that's what you're hopefully going to share with us today is that idea around that connection and that bond with people versus getting stuff done. That's sort of what it sounds like you're describing.
Yeah, and I would say the most powerful way we can invite people into that context and that sort of way of operating is to embody it. If you look at really amazing movements or organizations, they almost invariably have an extremely passionate, focused, charismatic leader or group of leaders at the helm. And they know what they're up to. They know what they're about, they know what they're building, and they know how they want to go about building it. And that inspires people. It gives people a sense of trust. It gives people a sense that they want to get involved and invest long term, because they can see and feel in the leadership that this is a ship I want to be on. These people
Mm.
are going somewhere, and something about how they're going there resonates with me. Now, there's lots of sort of toxic and negative charismatic leaders that we could look to history for. So just charisma is not enough, but true
Mm.
leaders are essentially in service to something greater than themselves, and they recognize that the well-being of the people that are on their team is central to their ability to fulfill the vision that they have.
I can I completely agree. And I think it can be easy to lose sight of that when people get focused on what needs to get done.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get whatever it is done. We don't have enough people, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough time, whatever that kind of lack mentality or whatever stress kind of scenario that often I find in organizations can really kind of be the way of doing things. So how do you create this other this transformative environment?
Again, if the leaders are doing it and they're living it, then that's like 9/10 of the law is right there. Like,
Mhm.
people are going to naturally gravitate. People are naturally going to come on board. Those leaders are going to have skills and capacities to communicate and orchestrate and manage. When that's not in place, it's actually really important that the leadership, people who are in the central roles of making decisions for the organization, that they take their own development seriously. And then I would say on the
Mhm.
personal level and on the professional level, if the leadership isn't interested in becoming more themselves, what place do they have to invite other people to do so? It just doesn't work. So I
Mhm.
would say the first thing is, if it's not already there, if you're not already embodied in that, seek out the opportunities that you have to learn and grow as a human being and as a professional. I think that's like step one. And then if you don't have the skills right now and your organization needs it, then you need to bring people in that can fill the gaps. Like,
Mhm.
great leaders aren't trying to do it all. They know they're not the best at everything. Great leaders know how to bring in the right people and put them in the right places. So that's a secondary piece. Is you're developing yourself. You're also recognizing where there's weakness or where there's areas where you just don't have the expertise that's needed, and you go out and you find those people, and you make your invitation for them to participate compelling for them. So
Mhm.
those are two. And then the third one is to recognize that in the process of engaging earnestly with integrity and with a genuine desire to grow your personal and your professional vision, much of the path is going to get revealed along the way. So I like that the lack mentality, I think is um, it's just so pervasive in our world, and understandably, right? Like, we want to succeed. There's lots of competition. There's lots of uncertainty, but modern human culture, almost no one doesn't know where their next meal is going to come from. So when it comes to
Mhm. Mhm.
survival, we're good, but
Mhm.
we don't behave as though that's the case. So we take things seriously that aren't actually as serious as we make them. And that makes everything more difficult. It makes us myopic.
Mhm.
We don't have perspective. It makes us averse to failure in ways that shut down creativity and real long-term success. So I think perspective is really key when it comes to, yeah, there's day-to-day stuff. Yeah, it's really busy. Yeah, we don't have enough resources. Like, welcome to the club. And then can we include, like, I think about growing a business like growing a garden. You're never going to be able to do everything the garden could want you to do to make it grow, but certain things bear more fruit than others. And so what
Mhm.
a good organizational leader does is they get really clear. What are the things that have maximum ROI in terms of output of my time, energy, and resources, and the throughput, and then the reciprocated give back of what does that create in my staff, in my team, in my organization, in my collaborative relationships? Can
Mhm.
I make those things first? And then where I can include those other pieces. And I think one of the biggest challenges we face is being able to discern the difference in value in terms of where our energy and resources go.
Well, I think what we have sort of in front of us here is transformative communication will probably be the best place to put your efforts.
Yeah. Well,
Because then you have that ripple effect.
yeah. So, I think for me, the transformative communication that I advocate for and talk about includes all kinds of communication. And like, communication is fundamentally transformative, but you could lay that across a spectrum where if we're highly agenda oriented, our communication is going to be minimally transformative. In other words, we have a really clear idea of what's what, we've drawn conclusions, we have a clear outcome we're trying to get to, and all of our communication is very narrow, at least in our own mind, in direction of that narrow agenda. Transformation doesn't really care about those narrow human perspectives. Transformation is like, what's really at play, and how do we include it all in a way that makes the energy and the interactions a truly creative act, where we don't know what's next, where we're genuinely curious. We have like a child's mind all the time. Now, I'm not suggesting that, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies throw out all the technical, practical, pragmatic stuff. It's like, if you're going to build a bridge, like, know the math. But if you are so convinced you have the blueprint for building a bridge, where is the innovation going to come in? Where is the adaptability going to come in when things change, when the budget drops by 30%, or when the geology shifts and you need to completely pivot? So people who are really good at business, people who are really good at communication, are good at the technical pieces, they're good at the practical pieces, and they're also highly available to pivot, to recognize new information as it comes in, and to shift their whole way of operating and their whole way of communicating in response to the information that's there. Now, that's a way more uncertain way to live and to run business, but it also, for me, is where human potential gets fulfilled. It's like, we don't fulfill ourselves, especially collectively, by staying rigidly attached to our preconceived notions of things.
That's a big point. Wow. I'm just letting that kind of sink in a little bit. So, well, we need to have that technical expertise. You're also encouraging leaders to be open and to be in that kind of, you're saying, the child's mind or beginner's mind, of that openness of being curious and not necessarily having all the answers.
Yeah. Can I say a little bit more about like maybe the nuances of transformative
Please.
communication?
Yes, that would be great.
Yeah. So in a way, I don't always explain it this way, but this is making sense just in the flow of our conversation. One of the biggest mistakes we can make is this preconceived idea that we're all adults.
Okay.
We're not. We have some grown-up parts, and we have some childish parts, and we have some underdeveloped parts, and we have some hurt parts and some wounded parts. And when it comes to communicating powerfully, it is about me over here being fully in touch with my humanity, all the different corners of my inner existence, all of the realities of my past. And that, not as a leader do I need to like air out all of my dirty laundry, but that if my colleagues and my staff feel my humanity, they feel my vulnerability, they know that I'm not perfect, they know that I'm willing to let them see me in my imperfections, in the places where I'm not super perfect and strong. That's where rapport and trust and loyalty really comes from. So transformative communication is not about having the right thing to say at the right moment, although that sometimes happens. It's about being willing to be fully human in relationship to other fully human people that are around us. And so then what ends up happening is, while we're doing our work, while we're speaking about the emails or the meeting or the project deadline, we're also attuned to one another. Like, I'm actually feeling my own emotional world, and like, wow, I'm feeling some stress about this deadline. And also, like, my son is not sleeping right now because he's teething, and that has a lot going on for me right now. And I'm totally committed to this. And I'm just letting you know that, like, right now I'm feeling some stress and pressure. And how do we make this work? Or, hey, I'm noticing in the last couple of days, you're not your usual, like, happy self. What's going on? Only when we're attuned to like the real humanness that's involved, are we even tracking those things? And when you look at like job satisfaction, it's atrocious. And the line has basically done this over the last few decades.
Mhm.
So people are not happy with their work, not exclusively, but there's a lot of unhappy people in their work environments. And the research I've done is that the primary reason people are not happy with their work is their supervisor.
Yeah, and
So
that's
they,
something we've hear again and again, that people leave their leaders, not the job.
yeah. And
And
so,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and that human connection is, it sounds like that's the point, the point of it, and talking about being human is beyond talking about being vulnerable or authentic or whatever. It's being kind of that true you. This is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And so transformative communication is really about being honest with ourselves about who we are, about what we're amazing at, what we're not amazing at, about what hurts us and what lights us up, and not being afraid to share that with the world, not being afraid for the world to see that. And then, because we're not afraid, then our movements in our work, our movements in our communication, they're like generous, they're loving, they're compassionate, they're clear,
Mhm.
they're inviting, they're inspiring. This is, it's in a way it's super obvious, but you go to these kinds of communication trainings and you get a handout and you go through and you do some of the questions, and they talk about the tools, and then you leave and it goes into the recycling bin or the garbage, and basically you go on to communicate the way you've always communicated. One of my critiques of a lot of trainings is that they're talking about a bunch of information, but there isn't a lot of heart on display and being invited in the training. And to me, if we're going to grow, if we're going to develop, if we're going to transform, the heart is where that all happens. It doesn't happen up here. More intellectual information is not going to help a terrible supervisor or manager become great. That
No,
ain't going to happen.
I don't think that's helpful. And the self-awareness piece is where this shift can really happen. And instead of being in the brain, the doing, the logic, the overanalyzing piece, that heart, I completely agree, is where we can connect that human to human.
Mm. Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about the transformative communication is that um, underlying it all, we just really want to be seen and known and valued by others. And one of the ways that happens is that we speak the things that really matter to us, and we make requests of each other. We invite each other into a participatory interaction in how we're going to navigate life together. And so this is one of the things where the self-awareness piece you mentioned is huge. If I don't know myself, if I don't know what matters to me, if I don't know what really kind of triggers me or touches those sensitive spots, then I'm not really in relationship with the things that are most meaningful in my life. And so how am I going to be able to communicate the things that are most meaningful to me with people who I supervise, or my colleagues, or people who supervise me? Um, and when we do, what we find is that there's these fundamental human needs that are always at play, and we are able to, even in our work environments, create structures and communication and interactions that facilitate the meeting of those human needs while the organizational goals get met. And when that happens, now you have a sustainably effective, productive organization, because everyone's being nourished and fed by their participation with one another. Everyone's getting the support and care and love they need. Yes, I used the 4-letter word. And then we can start to have perspective. So, like, if you're making fast food packaging lids, and that's your job, I could easily see why you wouldn't be inspired to come to work. But if you know that that's the work your organization does, but when you come to work, it's a bunch of beautiful people that you love being with, that you love collaborating with, that you love being supported by, great. Like, now human beings can be in that kind of environment and love their work and stay and do amazing work, because in spite of the output of the organization, their human connection and their other base human needs are all being met. And so I think organizations, if they have an output that people really love, that's super helpful. But even if it's not something that maybe a lot of people get excited about, the human connection and the cultural environment within an organization is a major factor in whether people feel satisfied and whether they do really good work.
Mm, I love it. And the way to help that is through this connecting to the human piece, to supporting them as human beings. This is fabulous. I think, Dolphin, everybody needs this kind of approach to organizational management, leadership, and teamwork and all of that. And so I really appreciate you bringing this topic forward and kind of sharing what that can look like, and that it really does come from that self-awareness piece first, and then communicating and leading by example, and then creating that in organizations. So I'm just wondering if you have any kind of final thoughts or anything else you feel people need to know before we wrap up here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I often encourage people to look at is that if there's a sense in you that more is possible, and who, I don't know who exactly is listening, but I'm sure there's going to be some managers and some executives and some different level of employee, that most human beings, especially in modern culture, look at themselves in their life and they relate to some sense inside that more is possible.
Mm.
And there's some kind of disconnect, or there's some kind of distance between the life they're living and the life they know they're able to live. And what I would encourage people to do is to tune into what might be holding you back. What might you be attached to? What might you be afraid of that's preventing you from being, saying, and doing the things that have you be fully expressed, where you don't have to look at your life or your career or look back after the fact and say, oh, I wish I would have. So I like to plug people into that. And then it's about start making decisions that are not comfortable, but that resonate with you in terms of, this makes me come to life. This makes me feel excited. This makes me feel like what used to feel kind of drab and gray now has color. So I would gravitate towards people, places,
Great.
things, and choices that bring more color and excitement to you and your life, and that you can do it. Like, even if it's been 40 or 50 years of something that feels kind of constrained and thin and shallow, that doesn't have to be your future. Like, whatever it's been, you are a creative, powerful human being that can shift your direction and really create something new. So I totally believe that.
Wow.
And I know that people can. So I'm just inviting people to really look at things in a more honest way and start making choices that nourish them.
That is wonderful. And I think anyone can be adding more of that into our lives. So thank you, Dolphin. I'm sure this will inspire many. I know it's inspired me to think bigger and broader about the impact and the way we can really be showing up day to day. So thank you for sharing with us. It's been great to get to know you here today and to really have you as part of the summit. So how can people follow you or get to know you more if they like what they're hearing so far?
Yeah. So I would say, I'm going to mention it actually. I just launched a relationship platform. It's education-based video content from all sorts of coaches, experts, authors, to help people with their personal romantic relationships. It's called Relationflix. It's relationflix.com. So FLIX, FLIX.com. So if people are looking for extra support with their communication, conflict resolution, understanding themselves and their partner, making their relationships better, they can check that out. And other than that, in terms of my personal work, and if people were interested in talking to me about speaking or doing some work with them, they can just reach me on Instagram. It's just at Dolphin Kasper is my handle. So DolphinKasper. And yeah,
Great.
you can reach out for me there.
Perfect. Well, I'll link those both below the video to make it easy for everybody to connect with you further. And just want to say thank you so much. This has been awesome. I really enjoyed your perspective here and that inspiration of what more is possible, more color, more connection, more engagement, and just thriving organizations. So this is great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah. It's been a pleasure. I'm glad you invited me in, and look forward to whatever else might be down the road.
Thank you. Yes, same, me too.